Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast, where we kind of like to just jump into some fascinating Islamic traditions and figure out, how they connect to our lives. Like right now, today.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 50,
Okay.
which is all about the evil eye.
The evil eye.
And just for those who might not be, super familiar with it, the Muwatta Imam Malik, it's like this foundational text in Islamic jurisprudence. It was compiled way back in the 8th century by Imam Malik ibn Anas.
Right.
It's really a collection of like the Prophet Muhammad's, sayings and actions.
Yeah.
Kind of shows us how the early Muslims like understood the world and how they, dealt with things.
Yeah. What's really fascinating about this specific book, Book 50, is that it focuses on the evil eye.
Right.
Which, at first glance, it might seem kind of like mysterious or even a little superstitious,
Yeah.
But when you really dig into it, it shows this like deeper understanding of how things are connected, like the seen and the unseen, the power of words and intentions.
Right.
And it's really important to seek protection and balance in our lives.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit.
Okay.
The evil eye. So we're not talking about like a spooky Halloween curse, right?
No, not exactly.
Okay.
In Islamic tradition, the evil eye isn't some like supernatural entity, or some evil force out there.
Right.
It's more about the potential harm that can come from, too much admiration, envy, or even just like an intense gaze that doesn't have like that acknowledgement of divine blessings.
Oh.
It's like these emotions and energies can mess up the natural order of things
Right.
and bring bad luck or even make someone sick.
So it's not like someone's like trying to put a hex on you or anything.
Yeah, no.
But it's more like the unintended consequences of those, emotions and energies.
Exactly. And that's what makes Book 50 so interesting. It doesn't just describe the evil eye, it actually dives into real life situations,
Right.
stories from the Prophet's time, and practical advice on like how to navigate all this.
And I bet those stories are full of insights,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So where should we start?
Well, one of the most like vivid examples of the evil eye in action is the story of Sal ibn Hunayf and Amir ibn Rabia.
Right.
It's in 50.1.1 and 50.1.2.
Okay.
So Saul, who is a companion of the Prophet, was doing ghusl, like the full body ritual purification.
Right.
And Amir just happened to see him. And he was like struck by how radiant Saul looked.
Right.
So Amir exclaimed, "I have never seen anything like what I have seen today. Not even the skin of a virgin."
Wow, that's some serious admiration right there.
Right.
So what happened next?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Right after Amir said that, Saul just collapsed.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he got really sick. Like his health just went downhill fast.
Oh, wow. So it was like instant cause and effect.
Yeah.
That really shows how seriously they took, the power of words and the evil eye back then.
Exactly. And, when the Prophet Muhammad found out about Saul, he was like, "What happened?" And when they told him about Amir's like super enthusiastic but, unblessed praise,
Yeah.
the Prophet kind of like reprimanded Amir and said, "Why does one of you kill his brother? Why did you not say, 'May Allah bless you'?"
Why does one of you kill his brother? That's a strong statement.
It is.
That really shows you how powerful words can be.
Yeah,
Even if you don't mean any harm.
exactly.
And it's like we have this responsibility to use our words carefully.
Absolutely. The Prophet's words highlight how important it is to acknowledge divine blessings in everything we see and experience,
Yeah.
especially when we're like admiring someone or something. It's like adding this spiritual protection to our words, recognizing that all good things come from Allah.
So it's not about like holding back admiration or joy,
No.
but it's about channeling it in a way that acknowledges where those blessings come from.
Exactly. And in this story, the Prophet didn't just like tell him off.
Right.
He told Amir to perform wudu,
Okay.
the ritual ablution, and use that water to wash himself.
So the wudu that Muslims do before prayer, washing hands, face, arms, feet.
Yeah, exactly. But in this case, it wasn't just about getting clean physically.
Okay.
The Prophet specifically said to pour the water over himself. Like it was a symbolic purification, washing away that bad energy from the evil eye.
So the water's like a conduit,
Yeah.
carrying blessings and restoring balance.
Right.
It's amazing how even everyday rituals like wudu can have this deeper meaning.
It really does. It shows how holistic Islamic teachings are.
Yeah.
The physical and spiritual are totally connected.
Right.
And even simple actions can have deep spiritual effects.
So in this case, the prophet was basically giving a spiritual remedy for a spiritual problem.
Exactly. The wudu, with all its prayers and blessings, is like a counter to the negative energy of the evil eye.
Hmm.
It's about restoring harmony, not just in Saul's body, but in like the spiritual realm too.
Wow.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about this whole story and like the whole idea of the evil eye is how fast it works. Like Saul got sick right there on the spot after Amir said those words, and then the wudu also happened super quick.
Yeah.
It really shows you how strong this unseen force is and how important it is to protect yourself from it.
It's like a reminder that our words, even when we mean well, can have a big impact.
Exactly.
So you got to be careful what we say, especially when we're admiring someone or praising them.
Absolutely. And this idea of like being aware of the potential harm brings us to another interesting part of Book 50,
Okay.
protecting people who are more vulnerable to the evil eye, like children.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Kids are seen as innocent and pure.
Yeah.
So their energy might be more sensitive to outside stuff.
Exactly. And Book 50 has this story in 50.2.3 about Jafar ibn Abi Talib's sons.
Okay.
Their nursemaid was worried because they looked so frail, and she thought it was the evil eye.
Oh, no.
So she asked the prophet about using talismans with Quranic verses on them for protection.
Talismans.
Yeah.
This is where it gets kind of mystical, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about objects that are supposed to have, like, protective powers.
Well, in Islam, talismans are understood a little differently. It's not like the object itself is magical or anything.
Yeah.
It's the words from the Qur'an that are written on them that have the blessings and offer protection.
So the talisman is like a container for divine energy and blessings.
Yeah. But doesn't that go against the idea of only relying on Allah for protection?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and Book 50 actually addresses that directly.
Okay.
While the prophet approved of using talismans, he made it clear that they only work if Allah wills it.
Okay.
He said, had anything been able to precede the decree, the evil eye would precede it.
So it's about recognizing that both spiritual forces and divine decree exist.
Right.
Talismans can make you feel safe, but ultimately it's Allah who decides what happens.
Exactly. It's a balanced understanding. You acknowledge the unseen world, but you still have faith in Allah's ultimate power.
Right. You're not just blindly trusting the talisman.
Yeah, you're using it as a way to connect with the divine and ask for his protection.
This reminds me of how some cultures have amulets or special prayers to ward off negativity.
Yeah.
It seems like wanting to protect yourself and your loved ones from unseen forces is something everyone feels.
Totally. It goes beyond culture and religion. It's like this deep down awareness that our inner world and the outside world are connected.
Yeah. We might use different words and practices, but the idea is the same, wanting protection, balance, and well-being.
Exactly. And you know, we've been talking about the evil eye as something harmful.
Right.
But Book 50 also presents this interesting perspective on illness itself.
Oh, okay.
It's not just seen as a bad thing or something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
It can be a way to purify yourself and grow spiritually.
Interesting. So instead of just trying to avoid or get rid of illness, you see it as a chance to become better spiritually.
Right. And you see this in 50.3.5 to 50.3.8,
Right.
where it talks about how illness can be a test from Allah.
Okay.
It's a chance for believers to strengthen their faith and cleanse themselves from sin.
So it challenges the idea that illness is just a physical problem. And it makes you think about the spiritual side of it.
Exactly. And there's this beautiful hadith that explains this idea really well. It talks about angels writing down what sick people say.
Wow.
If a sick person praises Allah and stays strong in their faith, Allah might grant them paradise when they die or heal them and purify them in this life.
It's like even when you're suffering, you can still become closer to Allah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about choosing faith and gratitude instead of giving in to despair and resentment.
Right. And that hadith goes even further, saying that even a tiny thorn prick can erase sins for a believer.
Yeah.
It really shows Allah's mercy and how even small hardships can change you for the better.
Absolutely. And this leads to an important question for our listeners.
Okay.
How do you think this perspective on illness as a way to purify yourself and get closer to Allah affects how you deal with suffering?
That's deep. It makes you rethink how you approach challenges in life.
Yeah.
To look beyond the pain and see the potential for growth.
It also reminds us that we're not just physical beings. We have spiritual and emotional sides too. So illness affects us on all those levels.
It's a reminder that healing is also a process that involves your whole self.
Yeah. It's not just about treating the physical symptoms.
Right. You have to take care of your spiritual and emotional well-being too.
Exactly. And while Book 50 emphasizes the spiritual side of illness,
Yeah.
it doesn't say you shouldn't seek refuge or treatment.
Okay.
In fact, it gives specific advice on practices and remedies to ease suffering and help you heal.
So it's not like you have to choose between spirituality and practicality.
Yeah.
They can work together.
Exactly. And one of the best examples of this is the story of Uthman ibn Abi al-As in 50.4.9.
Okay.
He was in a lot of pain, and the Prophet Muhammad told him to rub the painful area with his right hand 7 times while reciting a dua.
Okay.
It's a prayer asking for refuge in Allah's power.
It's interesting how specific the instructions are.
Yeah.
Use your right hand to say the dua 7 times.
Yeah.
It shows how important intention and focus are when you're trying to heal.
Right. It's not just about saying the words. You have to mean them and concentrate on them. You're aligning yourself with divine energy and asking for its healing power.
It also highlights the power of prayer.
Yeah.
Turning to something bigger than yourself for comfort and relief when you need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It reminds you that you're not alone in your struggles and that there's support out there.
And this idea of seeking refuge and healing through spiritual practices is also in 50.4.3,
Right.
where it talks about the Prophet Muhammad reciting the last 3 surahs of the Qur'an and blowing on himself for healing.
Something a lot of Muslims still do today.
Yeah, I've seen that.
When they want protection or healing, they recite those specific surahs.
Yeah.
It shows the power of these practices and the belief that the words of the Qur'an can really heal.
It's a beautiful example of how you can include spiritual practices in your daily life.
Yeah.
It gives you comfort, protection, and a connection to the divine.
And it's not just about reciting verses.
Okay.
There's a story in 50.4.11 where Aisha, the Prophet's wife, is being treated by a Jewish woman who's writing her a talisman. Aisha's father, Abu Bakr, suggests writing a talisman from the Qur'an instead.
So this means that it was okay to get treatment from people outside the Muslim community.
Yeah.
As long as it didn't go against Islamic principles.
Exactly. It shows a practical approach to healing, recognizing that knowledge and expertise can come from anywhere.
Right. It's about finding what works, regardless of where it comes from.
Exactly. And this openness to different types of healing is also emphasized when Book 50 talks about medical treatments.
Okay.
It acknowledges that medicine is important and that you should seek help from knowledgeable doctors.
So it's not an either thing.
Right.
You can value both spiritual and medical approaches to healing.
Absolutely. There's a great story in 50.5.1 about a man with a wound.
Okay.
The blood had clotted, and the Prophet asked which of his companions was the best doctor.
He was highlighting the importance of medical skills.
Yeah. And when someone asked about whether medicine actually works, the Prophet said, the one who sent down the disease sent down the remedy.
Wow. So
It
powerful.
really is.
It acknowledges that Allah sends us trials and illnesses.
Yeah.
But he also gives us ways to heal and recover.
Yeah.
It encourages us to learn and use the resources we have.
Exactly. It's about taking action and not just relying on faith alone. And this idea of medical intervention is also in 50.5.13 and 50.5.14,
Okay.
where it mentions cauterization as a treatment used by people like Sa'd ibn Zurara and Abdullah ibn Umar.
Cauterization.
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It does, right?
But it shows that even back then, they were trying different medical techniques to treat illnesses.
Exactly. People have always been looking for ways to relieve suffering and get better.
It's amazing how creative humans can be when it comes to dealing with pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while we've talked about different treatments and remedies,
Yeah.
Book 50 also highlights a simple but really important practice for dealing with fever.
Okay, and what's that?
Using water to cool it down.
Water.
Yeah. In 50.6.15, Asma bint Abi Bakr, a companion of the Prophet, is pouring water inside the collar of a woman with a fever. And she's remembering what the Prophet said to cool it with water.
It's such a basic thing, but it has spiritual significance because it's connected to the Prophet's teachings.
Right. It's like even the simplest actions can be healing if you do them with intention and compassion.
And the Prophet emphasizes this practice even more. In 50.6.16, he compares fever to the heat of hellfire.
Oh, wow.
And suggests that water, with its cooling properties, can bring relief not just physically, but also spiritually.
That adds a whole new meaning to cooling down a fever.
It does.
It's not just about feeling better physically,
Yeah.
it's also about seeking spiritual comfort and protection.
It's amazing how everyday things like water can have spiritual meaning and healing power in this context.
Yeah.
It shows how connected the physical and spiritual worlds are and how you can find grace and healing in even the most ordinary things.
And finally, Book 50 ends by talking about the importance of visiting the sick.
Yeah.
It brings in the idea of community, compassion, and taking care of each other.
It does. It completes this exploration of healing and well-being. In 50.7.17, there's a beautiful hadith that says, when you visit someone who's sick, you plunge into mercy,
Oh,
and that mercy settles in him.
that's beautiful.
It shows how spiritually beneficial it is to visit the sick.
Yeah.
It's not just about making them feel better physically.
Right.
It's about surrounding yourself with divine mercy. It reminds you that being kind and compassionate can really change things for both the person giving and the person receiving.
It also reminds us that we're all connected and that taking care of sick people, supporting them, and being kind to them benefits everyone.
Right. It creates a sense of community, empathy, and shared humanity.
And it's interesting how the book also talks about contagion.
Okay.
In 50.7.1e, the prophet says to separate sick animals from healthy ones.
Right.
It shows how you can balance compassion with practical precautions.
It's wise and compassionate at the same time.
Yeah.
You're protecting the community, but you're still caring for those who are sick.
It's a holistic approach, thinking about both the spiritual and practical sides of dealing with illness in a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really shows you that even when you're dealing with illness and hard times, there's still a chance for spiritual growth and compassion and connection.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of brings us back to the beginning of Book 50, where we were talking about the evil eye,
Right.
something that can disrupt harmony and cause harm.
Yeah.
And now we're ending with this act of compassion visiting the sick, which brings mercy and promotes healing.
It's beautiful how it all connects.
Yeah.
You know? It shows how our actions are all linked together and how they affect everything around us. It's like we have a choice.
Right.
We can choose whether we want to spread negativity or spread compassion and healing.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up our deep dive into Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 50, it's amazing how much we've covered.
Yeah, it really is.
We started by talking about the evil eye, not as some superstition,
Yeah.
but as a way of understanding the power of words, intentions, and energies.
Yeah.
And we talked about how important it is to seek protection and balance through spiritual practices like wudu and talismans,
Yeah.
but also by acknowledging that Allah has a plan and trusting in his power.
We also talked about how illness can be a way to purify yourself and grow spiritually.
Exactly.
It's not always a bad thing.
Right.
And we looked at the different ways Islamic tradition encourages healing,
Right.
from praying and reciting Quranic verses
Yeah.
to seeking medical help and doing simple things like cooling a fever with water.
What really stands out to me is how Book 50 combines the spiritual and the practical.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to choose one or the other.
Right.
It's about bringing together faith, action, and knowledge.
Exactly. It encourages us to be aware of our thoughts and feelings,
Yeah.
but also to take action in the world.
To look for solutions.
Yeah. And to care for ourselves and others.
It's a holistic approach to well-being, recognizing that we're complex beings
Absolutely.
with physical, emotional, and spiritual needs.
And it reminds us that healing can happen in so many ways.
Right. From saying a powerful prayer to getting treatment from a doctor.
And what I find so relevant is that this ancient wisdom still applies to us today.
It does. You know, the struggles of dealing with negativity, wanting protection, and seeking healing are things everyone goes through no matter where they live or what time period they're in.
Absolutely. The practices and remedies from Book 50 might be from a different time,
Right.
but the ideas behind them, wanting to be, finding balance and connecting with others, are things we all want.
Exactly. It shows how powerful these traditions are.
Yeah.
They can offer guidance and comfort to people across generations.
Right. And it shows how important it is to engage with these texts, not as something from the past,
Yeah,
but as sources of wisdom that can help us today and in the future.
absolutely.
This deep dive has really made me think. It made me realize that the evil eye is so much deeper than I thought.
Yeah.
It's not about being afraid of the unknown,
Right.
but about being aware, being mindful, and seeking protection through both faith and action.
And it reminds us that true well-being isn't just about our own health.
Right.
It's about our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, like our community, our faith, or having a sense of purpose.
Exactly. So as we end our exploration of Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 50, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought-provoking question.
Okay.
How can we bring together traditional beliefs like the evil eye with modern science?
That's a great question. It makes us think about how ancient wisdom and modern knowledge can work together.
It does.
Maybe we can use science to understand how energy intention and the power of suggestion work.
Yeah.
Maybe that can help us understand these old beliefs in a new way. Or maybe these traditions can teach us things about the human mind and how our well-being is connected.
Right. Maybe things that science is just starting to discover.
It's a really interesting area to keep exploring and talking about.
It is.
A place where faith and reason, tradition and modernity can come together.
And hopefully help us understand ourselves and the world better.
And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into the Echoes of Ihsan.
Thank you for joining us.
We hope this exploration has made you curious.
And inspired you to learn more about these rich Islamic traditions and their timeless wisdom.
May your path be filled with knowledge, compassion, and well-being,